Welcome to Crime Files TikTok compilations, the vault of real horror, where murder isn't fiction and the footage never lies. In this collection, we unearth chilling clips, haunting case files, and real-life moments that expose the darkest corners of the human mind. What you're about to witness is raw, unsettling, and unforgettable, and these aren't stories, they're warnings.
As promised, let's discuss the most disturbing and vile true crime case that you've probably never heard. But what's up? I'm Frankie. I talk about all things horror, true crime, and paranormal. So if you're into that, definitely give a follow, give me a little like, and maybe comment. I would really appreciate it since I'm just starting this account. But let's get into it. Before we start, I will give a trigger warning because this story is so insanely graphic, but I will be censoring myself quite a bit because there's a lot I cannot say here. But I'm going to try to power through and give you all the information that I possibly can. But if you're not into that, then definitely save yourself and maybe scroll the next video. So this here is Charlie Brandt. So in September of 2004, he was living with his wife Terry in the Florida Keys, and everybody who knew them said that they were madly in love and they were very normal. He had a normal job as an engineer, and they spent pretty much all their time together. They didn't have any kids. But like I said, they were in the Florida Keys, and if you're not familiar with that area, they have really, really bad storms. So in September of 2004, there was a really, really nasty hurricane heading their way. So they were evacuated, and they decided to spend some time with Terry's niece, Michelle, in Tampa. So they had decided to leave on September 12th. That was the agreed upon date between everybody. That way they could go home, check on their house, make sure everything was okay. But for some reason, Charlie insisted that they stay one more night and leave on the 13th instead. So everybody found that a bit odd, but they went with it and they just stayed the extra night. So fast forward a few days, and Michelle's mother, who is Terry's sister, can't get a hold of any of them. So she tries calling Michelle a bunch of times, nothing. Then Terry, then Charlie, no responses. So like any normal mother would, she starts to panic. And she ends up calling Michelle's friends and just asks, hey, can you stop, by the house if you go out and just check on it, see if anybody's there, see what's going on. So her friends agree. They pull up to the house. All the cars are in the driveway, but they see no action. So they try the door, they try the windows, can't get in. So they're walking around the house looking for any movement, any noises, anything, and just nothing until they make it to the garage. So it was one of those garages that has the tiny windows up top. And unfortunately, they look in and see that Charlie was in there. Clearly, he had unalived himself. So that is a very traumatic experience for anybody. So immediately they call the police. And when authorities arrive, they walked into a scene that was so horrific that it actually made some of the officers quit their jobs after this case, and almost every person on the scene became physically ill after witnessing what went on inside this house. So as they get in the door, they see immediately to the right, Terry was on a couch, clearly unalived. And then they make it through the rest of the house, and they make it to Michelle's bedroom, and she is on the bed, clearly unalived. And she was unalived in such a horrific and graphic manner that I cannot even begin to describe to you on this app. So feel free to look up the case and look up the details, but as far as I can say, if you can imagine a body being mutilated in the worst way possible, times that by about 100, and then maybe you're getting close. So after seeing this scene, the police begin investigating and starting to question people, and everybody that they're questioning is saying they have no idea how this could have happened. They were all so normal, and Charlie was the most normal guy we've ever met. We can't imagine how he could possibly do this to his family, especially his loved ones. It just doesn't make any sense. That is until they interview his older sister, Angela, who goes on to tell them a story that would change the entire trajectory of this case until the case came to a close. So Angela tells them a story about when Charlie was about 13 years old. It was January of 1971. They were living in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it was a normal snowy night. They had dinner and they were all getting ready for bed. And when Charlie's mother, who was 8 months pregnant, was in the bathroom, Charlie, 13 years old, walked in and unalived her. So Charlie's father immediately heard and ran in, and Charlie turned around and attempted to unalive him as well, then made his way down the hallway attempting to unalive his sister Angela. But when he fired his weapon at Angela, it malfunctioned, and that gave Angela the time to make a run for it, go to the neighbors, and call the authorities. But when the authorities arrive, they know Charlie did it, but Charlie was only 13 years old, and in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1971, they could not actually charge him with anything, so instead, they sent him to a psychiatric facility for a year. After about a year, Charlie's father did survive the attack and ended up being the one to bail him out of there. He fought tooth and nail for his son to get out, and he did, and that's when they all moved to Florida. So nobody ended up knowing about this besides Angela, and they actually had two younger siblings who they ended up telling that their mother passed away in a car accident because they didn't want them to know and grow up being afraid of Charlie. So the other siblings didn't even know the truth behind how their mother passed away. So aside from Angela, the only other person who knew was Angela's husband at the time, this guy named Jim, who was also Charlie's best friend. So when Charlie was getting ready to marry Terry, Jim told him, "Hey man, you have to tell her about your past. You have to tell her what you did. You can't enter a marriage on dishonesty like that." Charlie kind of brushed it off, and he was like, "Yeah, I will. And then next thing you know, Charlie and Terry actually eloped. No one was alerted. No one knew about it. They just came back and they were married, and none of the family even attended the wedding. So now only Angela and Jim know, because we can put two and two together and assume that Charlie did never tell his wife Terry. So time goes on, and then Terry makes a very disturbing phone call to Jim one night and says, "Hey, something's going on with Charlie, and I think I'm going to call the sheriff on him." And Jim immediately talked her out of doing that, asked her what happened, and essentially they had something called a fish gutting room. So they were super into fishing, and that's when they would prepare the fish. And apparently one day Terry walked in and Charlie was in there covered in blood, but the issue was there were no fish. So Terry was absolutely petrified of what her husband could have done, was going to call the sheriff, but Jim talked her out of it and said, "You can't do that. If he finds out and this isn't true, you're gonna get a divorce." So she didn't. And it's crazy to look back at this case and think that if Jim would have just acted a little bit different, this whole thing might not have happened. But again, we have to keep in mind that Jim might have thought that Charlie did tell her. He didn't know. So there was that. And then we also find out that the police found some really disturbing things. When they investigated their home, they found that they had an anatomy poster on the bedroom door. So it was one of those posters of a human, and it was a woman, and it was her muscular and skeletal system, and that's what was on the back of their bedroom door, so they could see it from their bed. I don't know, I just find that so creepy and bone-chilling after knowing the story and what happened. I just find that incredibly odd, but maybe that's just me. But that was weird. But they also found a log that Terry had kept about Charlie, and it would just say, not a lot of details, but it would just say, "Oh, Charlie had a weird day, and Charlie came home really late that night." And they found that really strange and tried to see if there were any connections between these dates and any other crimes that happened in the area. And it turns out there were a lot of connections with the dates of when Terry would log something and when another crime occurred in that area. I should also mention the fact that when they interviewed Charlie's coworkers, they had a lot to say about Michelle specifically, and they said that Charlie spoke about her in a very odd manner, and he actually called her Victoria's Secret, which is just so not appropriate to call your own niece. So it's just one of those cases that, looking back, if a few things had been different, or if somebody had maybe said something to either authorities or to Terry or even Michelle, this whole thing might not have happened. But again, nobody knew at the time, and This is just how things played out, and it is so heartbreaking and so sad and just the craziest case I've ever heard. I wish I could have given you more details. Maybe I'll make a YouTube video or like a podcast or something and actually fully talk about the case, but that is the true crime story of Mr. Charlie.
These are some of the most gruesome murders ever committed. Part 1. The case of Lisa Montgomery, otherwise known as the Womb Raider. Lisa Montgomery, who was a 43-year-old woman, was the first lady ever to be executed after being sentenced to 67 years in prison for committing a murder that literally shocked America. In 2004, Montgomery was sentenced to life after murdering a young woman named Bobby Jo Sinnett and then moving on to cutting open her stomach, removing her womb and her baby using a kitchen knife. See, Montgomery had claimed for a long time that she couldn't have kids, so she befriended Sinnett thinking that she could take her baby. So what she did was showed up at her house, strangled her with a rope, and proceeded to cut her open. The dead body was actually discovered by Sinnett's mother, who walked into a bloody pile and claimed her daughter looked like she had just exploded. But even after all that, the baby did survive and was returned to her father, where she is now about to turn 16 years old. That's insane.
So that conspiracy theory where people are trafficking human organs has now gotten a little deeper. So this 21-year-old former flight attendant was arrested for trafficking $3.3 million worth of a psychoactive drug containing ground human bones. Ground human bones. Let me repeat. This former 21-year-old flight attendant was arrested for trafficking $3.3 million worth of a drug containing ground human remains. She was arrested at the airport with this drug called Kush. Over 100 pounds of this drug that's only found on the black market. Take a look at this. This is the article about the stuff that she was caught with and was arrested for. Now, it's totally unclear of who is purchasing this stuff. I guess maybe it's people that are tired of the stuff that they've been using, and they want something a little bit different. But this contains human bones. Now, if you go back and check out some of my videos and all the stories that have been coming out of people arrested for selling human bones, it's got to make you think, where are they going? Maybe we know now. Well, she is facing up to 25 years to life. Now, here's the question on my mind, and the question I want to ask you. How long do you think she's going to survive once they found out what she was caught for and the people that she was transporting it for? How crazy is this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, I'd love to hear from you.
This is the worst way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, never look up the picture. This is Hisashi Ouchi, and he became the most radioactive man in history after a lab accident. On September 30th, 1999, the 34-year-old Hisashi and two other co-workers were working at the Takamura nuclear plant in Takamura, Japan, and they were put on an extremely tight deadline by their superiors. The plant converted uranium hexafluoride into enriched uranium for the purposes of nuclear energy. This usually involved a carefully timed multi-step process, but Hisashi and his co-workers attempted to take a shortcut to meet their deadlines, but this led to an horrific explosion of uranium solution that turned into a nightmare for Hisashi. The plant underwent emergency evacuation and the three men were immediately rushed to help. They all had been directly exposed to harmful radiation, but to different degrees. The sole survivor of the group was exposed to 3 sieverts of radiation. The second one was exposed to 10 sieverts of radiation. And Hisashi was exposed to a whopping 17 sieverts of radiation, which was more than any human in history. And by the time Hisashi arrived at the hospital, his body was already covered in burns, and his eyes were leaking blood, but his agony had just begun. 3 days after the accident, Hisashi was transferred to the University of Tokyo Hospital. Hisashi's lack of white blood cells and his non-existent immune response prompted experts to try a number of procedures to save him. Doctors tried countless skin grafts and blood transfusions, and even stem cell transplants, but sadly, none of these seemed to work. Hisachi soon cried out, "I can't take it anymore, I'm not a guinea pig," just after 1 week of treatment. But although Hisachi begged for his death, his family insisted that doctors kept him alive to keep trying experimental treatments. Hisachi's skin began to melt off his body, and even after this, his relatives ordered his doctors to do whatever it took to keep him alive. All in all, Hisachi was kept alive against his will for a disturbing 83 days. At one point, he suffered 3 heart attacks in 1 hour. Following the guidelines from his family, the doctors resurrected him again and again. Every time he died, he came back and suffered extreme brain damage. And on December 21st, 1999, Hisachi finally died of his last heart attack after multi-organ failure, and it was only then that his torture stopped. You really can't fathom the amount of pain this man was in until you see the photo of him. He doesn't even look human and kind of looks like an insect. The radiation poisoning is that bad, but I really don't recommend you look it up. But if you do, while you're looking at it, keep in mind he was kept alive for 83 days in that state. Could you honestly imagine what was going through his head and what his body was feeling?
One of the most gruesome cases of sadistic torture we've ever covered, the case of Junko Furuta. Japan, 1988. 17-year-old Junko is rubbing her bruised knee. She's laying kind of awkwardly in a ditch on the side of the road. Her bike is practically on top of her at this point. It's 8:30 p.m. It's not the most optimal time to get injured alone. Junko looks up. She's frustrated. She was riding her bike home from her part-time job when this random 15-year-old boy comes up to her out of nowhere, completely unprovoked, and kicks the side of her bike. She and her bike go flying off the road into this ditch, and now she's rubbing her slightly bloody knees. She's dusting the dirt off her legs when this figure walks up to her. Another boy, maybe a little older, perhaps 18. He offers to help her up. That guy is famous around here, the one that kicked you. He's a pervert. He once threatened me with a knife, you know? Come on, let's get you up. I can escort you home if you'd like. I'm sure he's still somewhere around here. It's a split-second decision. Do you risk being alone and vulnerable to the bike-kicking pervert to come back and get you? Or do you take the helping hand, hoping it's someone safer? The possibility that the two of them planned for this to happen probably does not cross your mind.
Oh, it was pre-planned?
Pre-planned. They're friends. As Junko and the helping hand are walking towards her house, they pass by one of those abandoned warehouses, and suddenly this guy's attitude completely switches. You know I'm a Yakuza member, right? It's like the mafia, but in Japan. This is our whole thing. We kill you by faking an accident, we hit you with a car, but I can forgive you if you offer yourself to me. He drags Junko into the abandoned warehouse and essays her. But when he's done, he is sitting next to her. She's very panicked, and he tries to convince her, actually, there's more. The Yakuza still wants to kill you, but because you look kind of like my girlfriend, I feel a little bit of sympathy for you. I want to let you live. I can talk to my superiors and ask them not to kill you, but you have to stay with me for maybe the weekend. He leaves to call 2 of his friends, and he tells them, I've captured a woman. Do you guys want to eat together? That night, him and his 3 friends would take turns gang essaying her, and they would invite more friends over, and soon the torture would begin. They would make fun of her. It was estimated that Junko was essayed by at least 100 different men during her 44 days in captivity. The sexual torture would only escalate in the next few weeks. It's almost like her captors and the other friends who would be invited over were playing this game of who can be more sick, who can be more twisted. Within a few weeks, they start essaying Junko with other objects. They initially start with random objects that they could find, get their hands on, but eventually they start intentionally looking for objects that would cause the most damage. They begin to torture Junko by inserting sharp scissors, metal rods, metal skewers that you use to grill meat on, glass beverage bottles into her private parts to essay her. At one point, they placed a hot light bulb into her private region and roughly moved it around until it shattered inside of her. Junko would be essayed so regularly and so brutally that her internal organs were, quote, mangled by the end of the 44 days.
This is the reason why nowadays when you order like an Uber or a Lyft driver, the driver would tell you like what's your name before you get into the car because of what happened to this girl. This happened in 2019. This girl, Samantha Josephson, was hanging out with a bunch of her friends, and they were pretty much partying out in like North Carolina, and they were just turning up. She's like 19 years old at the time. She's at this bar with her friends, and she ends up deciding that she wants to go home for the night, like around like 2 o'clock in the morning. She goes outside, she calls an Uber to come pick her up. While she's waiting outside, a black truck pulls up and is driven by this dude named Nathaniel Rowland. This girl unknowingly gets into the vehicle of the person who's gonna murder her because she thinks it's her Uber.
So it was a mistake? She got in the wrong car?
She got into the wrong car. She just got into this dude's car. He turns on the child lock, so she's trapped inside of his car with him. He ends up driving her out like somewhere hella far. He stabs her like 120 times in the backseat of his car.
He does it in the car?
In his own car, yes. Does a whole bunch of other stuff to her. And then just like drops her body off like in some field out there in North Carolina or whatever. After that, her friends are pretty much like,
what happened?
She never hit us up that she went home or whatever, that they were just worried about her. So they end up saying that she's missing. They end up searching for her. The police end up finding her dead body a day later. And they pretty much look on the cameras of like who picked her up. When they find him, they look into his car and his car is just covered in blood.
Dude, so what was his motive? Like, was he just crazy and he just wanted to kill somebody?
Yeah, it was just by like, she was literally just wrong place, wrong time type of thing, where she just happened to get into a crazy person's car, bro, thinking that it was her Uber.
Before I start this case, I want to give a massive trigger warning. This one is awful. Anita Kobe was more than just beautiful. She was one of the kindest people that you could ever meet. She had a calling to help people in life, and she intended to do just that. Her mother was a nurse, and she wanted to follow in her footsteps. Anita Kobe was born on November 2nd of 1959. From the minute that she was born, she was the apple of her parents' eye. In 1981, Anita met John Kobe, and they instantly fell in love and got married. Anita and John loved each other very much, but 3 years into the marriage, they realized that they were no longer on the same page and decided to take a break from the marriage. But not long into the separation, they realized that they really did want to work things out and wanted to be together, so they decided to reconcile, but didn't move back in together right away. Anita was living with her parents in Blacktown, which is a suburb of Sydney, Australia. On February 2nd of 1986, Anita had to work at the Sydney hospital, and then after work she decided to grab dinner with a few friends. After dinner, she had a friend drop her off at the train station. She then took the train from Sydney into Blacktown, and there she would normally meet her father. But that night, when she arrived at the train station, she realized that the payphones were not in working order. They had been vandalized. She then went out to see if she could get a taxi to her parents' house, but every taxi was in use at that time. So she decided to just walk home, but Anita would never make it home, and 2 days later, a farmer would find her body in a field. Anita had been beaten brutally, and she had been essayed multiple times. Her throat was slit so bad that she was nearly decapitated. Police started looking into John, thinking that maybe he had been involved. They interrogated him for so long that he finally falsely confessed. But just a few days later, the medical examiner's report would come in, and they would find that Anita had been beaten and essayed by multiple men, not just one, so John was released. Anita's case went public when a local radio show got a hold of her medical examiner's report and read the results of that report on live radio. People in this area became absolutely enraged and demanded that the police find out who had done this to Anita. There were several men in the area who were known criminals or wannabe gangsters, as you could say. Some of them were brought in to be questioned, and one was held on another charge, and that's when they were able to get a confession. I'll talk about that in part 2. It'll be up in a couple of minutes. Give me some time to film it, and it'll be down in the comments.
James, she doesn't want to talk to you.
911, what's your emergency?
He's trying to walk. I'm sorry, he's trying the door. Yep, answer the dad.
Get off the porch!
On July 31st, 2022, a family is left shaken after an unexpected visitor refuses to leave when his knocks go unanswered. When he attempts to force his way inside their home, the family scrambles for a way to stop him. The resulting confrontation ends in disaster, with every terrifying moment captured by the Ring camera. The following is based on official police records, and some of the footage has never been seen before. Just before 11 a.m. on July 31st, 2022, 22-year-old Allison Ducrow and her mother Stacy return from breakfast to their home in Sydney, Ohio. As they near their door, an unknown vehicle pulls into their driveway.
Stop it, Allie. Boys, in the house.
A few seconds later, the driver of the vehicle approaches the house. Through the Ring camera on their door, Allison recognizes the visitor as her ex-boyfriend, 22-year-old James Rail. At this point, James has been standing on the Ducros porch for about 3 minutes.
James, she doesn't want to talk to you. James.
While James never responds to Stacy, he soon leaves the porch. This may have seemed like the anticlimactic end to the eerie encounter, but unfortunately it was only the turning point in what would soon have a disastrous end. Though he disappears from the view of the Ring camera, James walks around the property. A few minutes later, he's spotted again, returning to the door.
Wait. Hey, he's coming back. Nope, I'm calling. James, she doesn't want to talk to you.
On the other side of the door, Allison calls 911.
911, what's your emergency?
There's some guy on my front porch, and he won't leave, and he's got his hands behind his back, and he'll answer me on the ring.
Okay.
But he left me a voicemail on my phone last night. He's trying to lock. I'm sorry, he's trying the door. No, don't answer the dad.
Get off the porch!
Dad, no! Oh my God, can you please hurry?
Okay, do you know who he is? Hello? Ma'am?
We have guns.
James, no.
3 shots are fired, and James stumbles back and off the porch. He doesn't make it far before he falls. All that is visible in the Ring camera are his feet, where he's now lying in the driveway in front of Stacy's vehicle.
This girl was killed and had all of her teeth removed by a cartel member while on vacation in Mexico. The body of 23-year-old Lisbeth Flores was found dead in the Mexican town of Matamoros. The sad thing is, Lisbeth was a mother of 2 and was also visiting Mexico for vacation. On August 9th, 2023, Lisbeth told her mother that she would be crossing the border into Matamoros to visit her boyfriend. Lisbeth assured her mother that she would return later that evening. This wasn't her first time crossing the border, but for some reason, her decision to do it did not sit right with her mother at all. Maybe it was her instincts telling her something bad was going to happen. But regardless, she let Lisbeth go. However, when Lisbeth failed to return home that night, her mother knew something was wrong. She filed a missing persons report immediately the next morning. But tragically, the day after filing, Mexican officials discovered Lisbeth's lifeless body abandoned on a field in Matamoros. And the condition of her remains were absolutely horrific. She had been brutally assaulted and all of her teeth were removed from her mouth before she died. And the fatal injury seemed to be from a powerful blow to the head using this large rock that was discovered at the scene. Some say it was robbery, others say it was sexual assault, but no one really knows what happened exactly between Lisbeth and her killer. The good thing is the killer was arrested. Braulio Martinez was caught at his residence in connection with the murder, and after pleading no contest, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison, which many people thought wasn't a long enough sentence. This is just so sad, and due to the violence in this area, Lisbeth's mother is now without a child, and her own 2 kids are left without a mother. But luckily, local businesses stepped up by contributing funds to her children's education. As this kind gesture definitely helped, nothing will bring back their mother, Lisbeth Flores. May she rest in peace. This might be the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. Octavio da Silva was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil, and on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game when he sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began a fight with the referee. Abreu threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Abreu. Abreu died on the way to the hospital, and when fans watching the game, including Abreu's family and friends, found out about his death, they invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him, and then ripping his limbs from his body with just their strength and no weapons, and then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field. And what makes this worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The video and pictures are extremely disturbing, and I don't recommend looking them up. The way his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because it wasn't cut off properly and it was just ripped off. This case is absolutely awful, but why did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir Abreu to death, he would still be alive today. But just imagine being literally ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
These crimes are real, and the truth deserves to be heard. Subscribe for more chilling stories. Like if this left you speechless, share to keep these cases alive, and comment your thoughts below. Stay sharp and stay safe.